Urban Meyer, 2 jobs come up. Texas head coach, Ohio State athletic director. Do we have any thoughts in those directions?
I will start out by saying, as long as you put Urban Meyer in Texas in the title of whatever YouTube video you're doing, your numbers will go through the roof, as what we've seen recently. So the algorithms like those 2 mentions. I'm still not convinced he's going anywhere. I think he's happy doing what he's doing. But my 5% that he would leave is maybe now up to 35%. But I think he's good where he is in terms of just doing TV, which he's awesome at. I mean, there's nobody like him. Nobody does what he does on television, and he gets to be a grandpa and do that stuff, and maybe watch his kid a little bit playing at Cincinnati, or is at least on the team. Until I hear otherwise, I'm going to assume that he's not leaving. But I did enjoy the reports from Austin that Shelley Meyer, his wife, was doing some house searching in Austin. Unverified, but certainly those are always fun reports to read.
Yeah, exactly. Before he took the Ohio State job, he allegedly bought land outside of State College, Pennsylvania, and multiple other places. So we're not quite to the point of where we're tracking plain tail numbers, which is always a part of a coaching search, but people down there sure seem to believe it. I'm skeptical, but I'm leaving an escape hatch, kind of the way that Tony is, that you just can't predict things that are unpredictable. I've talked to some people around the situation. Obviously, Texas is interested. I think that if the family had their way, Urban would not coach again, but I don't know if Urban's made up his mind.
I just think the health situation still is the stumbling block. I'm not 100% convinced he can ever have a job like that ever again. If that can't be corrected or alleviated one way or the other, medication, surgery, whatever. And so I am very skeptical that it's going to happen. And not only that, I mean, Texas, I mean, they can pay him $10 million, I suppose, and offer all of his blue chip staff members and support staff people as much money as, double what Ohio State's paying them or whatever, maybe, so be it, whatever. I just am skeptical. I don't know. I just think it just seems like an awful big rebuild at Texas to try and accomplish something that, just doesn't seem possible to me. I don't know. It'd be a lot of work. I don't know. It just seems I know Texas is great recruiting territory, and, Texas had, a national championship team in the mid 2000s with Vince Young, and they've lived off that glory. They got to the championship game with McCoy, and then he got hurt, obviously. In 09 or 10 or whatever year that was. But, it just, there's this romanticism about how great the University of Texas football has been. In my lifetime, I've really not seen it. It's really not that big a deal. When I was a kid, they were just they were great in the early 70s, but I would say late 70s to late 80s, I don't recall much discussion about them at all. Ricky Williams kind of turned on some stuff there in the late 90s, but they were always a day late and a dollar short, just as they've been the last decade. I mean, to me, it's all hat and no cattle, to use one of their phrases. So to me, I just don't think. I mean, they have the support, they have the money, but something is completely disconnected there. Kind of like at USC, was great 10, 12, 15 years ago. Not any good the last decade, really. Not any good at all, to be honest with you. So,
or the 2 decades before that.
Yeah, and really, struggled prior to that. So, I mean, you think about the Hackett years at USC and the coaches they went through, trying to find a magic formula for what John Robinson had done, and the guys McKay and back prior to that. So I don't know. I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical. I just don't see that he's not going in there on third base. He's running down the first baseline again, and that's no fun to me. That I don't know. To me, I mean,
Partners,
especially when your health's in question, I don't see it.
does he have the dance partners in terms of the conference? I mean, we look at a pretty bad Big Ten this year, but the Big Ten, when Urban was here, was not as bad. And I think that the Big 12 is kind of a jabroni league. It really is. I mean, it's Texas when they decide to show up. It's Oklahoma, and then we had a couple years where Baylor and TCU were kind of there. Oklahoma State and Mullet Man, they like to kind of poke their well-coiffed head up every so often. Iowa State's having some success here and there, but it's it takes more than just putting a team out there. I think you need to have the pieces around you, and we all love to tell the story of how Urban Meyer, there's no gentleman's agreement or whatnot in terms of recruiting, and this league isn't going to be worth anything unless some people step it up and whatnot, and whatever other tales you like to tell from when Urban joined the Big Ten. I don't know if the Big 12 is going to be capable in its current iteration to create a monster. I just don't think it. I mean, if you're the tallest guy in a room full of little GI Joes, it doesn't really matter. No, it doesn't matter at that point. So I don't know. I think it's just too big of a task. But coaches want to coach, and Urban's still a young guy. So you just don't know. I just don't know where his mindset is.
Aren't money and talent the two most important commodities, and don't they have both of those?
They also have a lot of intrusions in terms of the administration and whatnot, and Urban would not deal well with all of that stuff. There's just a lot of, I think there's more of a donor culture there that just would annoy the living hell out of him. Yes.
The donors want us to play with a wingback?
Yeah, money and talent are very important, but you know what? I also think some autonomy is as well, and I don't think he would get that autonomy there.
I think there's entitlement with the boosters. There's entitlement with the players in terms of it. It's a soft culture, and there's just too many cooks in that kitchen. And Urban Meyer talks all the time about the third uncle that gets involved with recruiting. Texas may as well be called the Texas third uncles. I mean, they've got, and it's not in terms of recruiting, but all of the rich dudes that are boosters who aren't used to being told no when they give their input would have to be okay with this. And they might be initially. Until then, they are told no, and then they're going to get mad.
Well, I think part of their problem is Texas high school prospects are now going all over the country. Ohio State's got the top two guys for 2022, the quarterback and the wide receiver, coming to Ohio State. By having an SEC school in the state with Texas A&M, you've now created an entree where Florida schools, Georgia, etc., LSU, which is right next door, can come over and say, okay, you're living in an SEC state. You watch all of our games on SEC Network, or all you have. Okay, if you don't go, to Texas or Texas A&M, that everybody back here in your hometown can watch you play because you're in SEC country too. So that's created a problem. Oklahoma gets their share. At Texas, that was one of the things I didn't mention in my diatribe a minute ago, is Texas has never closed off that border. I mean, Mac Brown, when he had it rolling, he was getting 10 of the top 12 guys in Texas every year. In the early 2000s, late 1990s, early 2000s, Texas was recruiting a top 5 class every year into Mac Brown, great recruiter, and they were selecting the guys from Texas that they want as opposed to recruiting them. That's no longer the case. Everybody across the country is going into Texas and taking whoever they want, whoever they can get and whoever they want. And Texas is now lucky to get 3 of those top 12 guys. And if you don't have that basis of talent at the University of Texas and get, even 8 of the top 12 guys every year, 7 of the top 12 guys, it's hard to maintain that dominance at the top of the Big 12 food chain. And they just aren't. They have not recruited to that level and kept the top Texas guys at home. And, J.K. Dobbins, I mean, up and down the line, you just look at it. Ohio State's done a number on them, but everybody else has too. I mean, it's not a one school thing. They used to have all the benefits, and today they don't have any of them.
Real quickly, the way that they used to recruit, the way they used to recruit under Mac Brown was that they would have their junior day early in the cycle, and they would bring in the top 3 corners from the state, and they bring in the first corner, like, you're offered. Are you going to accept? Yes or no? And if he said yes, then they would send, if they only needed 1 corner, they'd send 2 and 3 home. If he said no, they'd say, get out of here. They'd offer number 2, and they would go through that cycle. But even when they were getting 10 of the top 12, they still were not, maybe whether or not it was our recruiting services that had the rankings or their own rankings, they were still letting the wrong guys get away from them. They still weren't able to really get across the finish line because maybe they weren't evaluating well. Well, they're not even really getting a chance to evaluate now because they're just, Ohio State has more 5-stars out of Texas through the last several cycles than Texas has. So, you do the math.
I hear all that, and you guys are more involved in it than I am, and I've heard the same from other sources, so I'm not going to deny that they're missing out on their best players, but the recruiting rankings would belie where they're finishing in the standings. They have brought in the 8th, the 3rd, and the 3rd best recruiting classes in the country the last 3 years in 2020, 19, and 18. And I would think Urban Meyer would correct whatever the issues are anyway. His instant credibility to the program would correct much of that, I would think.
I think that's an interesting thing that you brought up, those rankings, and that is important. I would say that they've probably done pretty well outside the state of Texas to have those kind of rankings. And one thing that people don't take into consideration is, and this has hurt Ohio State, is when you have not made Ohio your main focus in recruiting, which it is, but it isn't. I mean, Tressel in a 25-man class used to take 12 or 13 Ohio guys, whereas Meyer got down to where he was only taking 5 or 6. And we've even seen probably fewer than that in 1 or 2 years here recently. When you don't take Ohio guys as the basis of Ohio State recruiting, there's no loyalty there. So at the first sign of adversity, a Trayvon Grimes or, whoever it may be, cuts and runs. And that could be the case at Texas too. If they're not building it behind kids from Houston, Dallas, et cetera, and they're having to go to San Jose and San Diego and Camden, New Jersey to get players, the first sign of adversity, those guys are going to cut and run. So, because they don't have an allegiance, they didn't grow up singing the Eyes of Texas and whatever. But I think that is an interesting phenomenon. We've seen it hurt Ohio State, and it may be a factor. And again, I don't have their recruit list in front of me, but you do make a good point. The other thing I would say is, for success in 2020, it's got to be deeper than just the last 3 classes, because the 2 most recent classes are going to have a minimal impact on this year's season anyway. It's got to be the sophomores, the juniors, and the seniors who the 3rd, 4th, and 5th year guys who do most of the heavy lifting usually, and maybe in the 4th and 5th year out they had good classes too. But maybe that bodes well if Herman's not coming back. That if that guy can keep the nucleus, whoever it is, that they'll be a pretty good team the next couple of years.
I will let everyone know that we're here talking Ohio State football with these 3 each and every week. We got Steve Hellwagon on the line from Bucknuts 247 Sports, Tony Girdman, Buckeye Scoop, and Kevin Noon, of course, from Rivals Buckeye Grove. This show each week will continue based on individual contributions, and hopefully a sponsorship is out there. So we will continue to strive to get that, but you can certainly take care of the second part with the individual contributions that we receive on various live streams. We've got 3 professionals here that donate their time each and every week. So keep that in mind, that if you want to see Ohio State football coverage here live every week, that's what we need is, again, contributions from you, and also looking for a sponsorship. So if you have any ideas there, or own a business, or know of anyone who does, then please let us know. Roberto, I don't know that I can make a whole lot out of this question. The question about how they practice the defense before Friday cancel, and the second half approaches to not almost blow a 35-7 lead.
Yeah, he's probably just wanting to know if it's something that they've worked on. Was it something that they were working on before the game was canceled on Friday? That were they going to have improvement based on the second half of Indiana, which was a disaster by anybody's way of thinking? So my feeling is, yeah, they probably spent that time and worked on it, and have talked about it in the interim since then, and I'm sure they're continuing to work on it when they get back on the field this week. So yeah, Roberto, I wouldn't worry about that. That it's at least been dealt with and worked on. Whether it's going to be any better or not, we'll have to wait and see. I'm not sure Rocky Lombardi and his receivers are the guys that are going to threaten that, but he's capable, somewhat capable. He's a little erratic as a passer from what I can see. Barely a 500 quarterback, maybe a little over percentage wise, but he I don't know if it's his footwork is bad, but just seems like there's a lot of third downs where he's trying to throw the ball downfield and it's 8 feet over the receiver's head, and it guy's running wide open and just misses him. So now, having said that, he did make a couple great throws against Northwestern this past week, put the ball exactly where his guy needed it to be on those 2 touchdowns, the deep one and the one kind of over the top in the red zone. So he's capable, could make him pay a little bit, but he's not anywhere near the caliber of player that Penix was.
Sounds like they need to recruit taller receivers.
No, better quarterback.
Okay.
Better.
According to 247 Sports, according to David Greenshield, Texas has the 5th most talented team according to recruiting.
Well, we all know what you can do with recruiting rankings, right, Steve and Kevin?
And according to Row the Boat, Urban certainly sabotaged us year after year. I think anyone in the country would love to be sabotaged to the tune of 86-9.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Some statements don't even justify, because, boy, oh boy, it's so easy. I see all the national championships you've won. I mean, that's kind of my take on that, is that, winning, Ohio State went 34 years and didn't win a national championship. So, because they didn't win 3 of the last 5, we're going to castigate this guy. Give me a freaking break. It's kind of my feeling on that.
And I get it. You could start with one game. You could choose one of many games, or you could add on 2 or 3 games, whatever your number is, from just having this just mind-blowing run from 2012 through 18. If you add the Michigan State game from 15 or 13, or, you tack on a couple of those, it could go from being elite right there with Nick Saban. If you look at the actual records, if you look at the winning percentage, I know Saban got the opportunity to win national championships, and to his credit, but I like to point out to people, he was given the opportunity. 2017, he was given the opportunity to play for a national championship. Didn't win his division, got the opportunity to play for a national championship, and he certainly cashed in, but he was given more opportunities than Urban Meyer. But if you just look at their record, they're almost exactly the same. But yeah, you could tack on a couple wins here and there, Kevin, and then that Urban Meyer run from 12 to 18 just becomes like something that's just can't be touched.
Yeah, we can sit there and I think the thing is that Urban lost so few games that it's easy to sit there and remember all 9 of them or whatever and be like, well, in the sideways rain game at home against Michigan State, if they would have done this, and in the Big Ten championship game against Michigan State, they would have done this, this, and this, that would have never been in a situation of where Jeff Hireman misses a block. And, I think you could sit there and explain away at least 4, maybe 5 of the 9 losses at that point. So, you're a victim of your own success at that point, because if you're dropping 2 a year, that's a lot of games to remember at that point. But when you only lose whatever it is, 9 over that run, they all are fresh wounds to the most diehard fans, and everybody will have an opinion about them.
Urban Meyer didn't bench Cardale Jones. Cardale Jones benched Cardale Jones. Let's just that I'm seeing this comment there. That 2015 offense was not good. The passing game was not good. And a lot of that was Cardale Jones, and they were winning games. They should have been blowing people out, and they were winning by 10 or 14, or that was an unremarkable year. And there was never a chance to start Joe Burrow. So I have to go. It's time to go. Let's do some score predictions and let's get out of here.
Yeah, I digress. Joe Burrow was not Joe Burrow at Ohio State. You can't look at Joe Burrow after 2 years at LSU with those freak receivers that he had there and say that is who Joe Burrow was after a sophomore. Give me a freaking break.
Sure, it's like saying Tom Brady should have won a Heisman at Michigan because he was that great with the Patriots.